Hello, and welcome to Heading North. My name's Nick, your host as always, and you are watching episode number 2 of our video podcast, but episode number 22 as a total. And as I was coming up with ideas for this week's episode, I was a little bit baffled. I'm still doing a lot of traveling. I'm actually in Marshall, Minnesota, which a fun fact about Marshall is that they actually test new airplanes landing here and taking off here because of how windy it is. It's one of the windiest places in the country. If you're wondering where this is compared to my northern stronghold, let's see. So if we're looking on the map here, and I apologize, my camera's going to be a little bit funky. I brought my GoPro with me and not my Razr camera. So it's a little bit lagged as it's connected a different way and not a direct line in. I do apologize by that. I know it's going to be a little bit tough for some people to watch. But anyway, I'm up here in Duluth. You've got your little Minnesota area here. I'm right up here in Duluth. The Canadian border, which we're going to get to that, is right up here. And where I'm at is actually right down here. I'm very close to the South Dakota and Iowa border in Marshall, Minnesota. Southern Minnesota University is right across the street from here. So hopefully you guys don't hear too much noise coming from that or the main road or even outside because these hotel walls are a little bit paper thin. But as I was alluding, and I am alluding with this awesome t-shirt that I picked up while I was in Ontario, Canada, I've been really pondering on what to do this week's episode about. And I realized that I tote this show as not only a outdoor recreation podcast, but a travel podcast. And I haven't talked a lot outside of maybe episode 3 about the travel aspect of even all the things that I do as far as like what you see with my social media between at Nick_Riz, RIS, 24 on Instagram and Facebook, or on the Heading North podcast Instagram or Twitter or TikTok. Yes, that's right. We are on TikTok and YouTube, which is where a lot of people will be watching this if you're not watching it on Spotify. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my trip into Ontario, Canada. This is something that I was really excited about. I haven't had a chance to go up to Canada. And when I moved here last year, I realized in Duluth, I'm only about 2.5 hours away from the Canadian border. But as we know, there is the silent killer, which is the coronavirus or COVID-19. And that had actually shut down the border and made it very hard to get across. And it was still possible at that time, but you had to show a test and it had to be done by a recognized doctor within Canada. So I didn't want to risk it and not be able to get back into the country, especially into the United States after leaving to go to Canada and not be able to get back because I either have a positive test or I was unable to get a test within the 72 hours that they wanted it to be done. So as of, let's see here, April 1st, 2022, the Canadian border was announced to be open to all fully vaccinated U.S. citizens. Now, in order to go across the border as a U.S. citizen, you either need a verified ID or your passport. And in COVID times, they've also now added the Arrive CAN. So that's ARRIVE CAN, CAN, all one word. You can download the app or go to the website. And what this is you upload your passport as a traveler and you create a little document for yourself as a traveler. And then you also update and add your vaccine status. So they want to see your vaccine card as a U.S. vaccine. I'm not sure exactly as far as if Mexican citizens can go across. I do know that in the U.S. we are very lucky that we can cross on both sides with just the passport or that verified ID. But it is very important to know that you have to fill out the ArriveCAN form and it has to be submitted 72 hours before you arrive to Canada. I got a little bit nervous as I was coming in because I got out of work a little bit early. What I had actually done was I had the opportunity to go up and talk to some of my accounts for my day job up on my way to the border in Grand Marais, as well as Tofty and a couple other areas, some of the larger accounts that I shall not name because this is a podcast and I'm not monetized by them. But I had the opportunity where I could go do that and then head right across the border. So I realized that I was going to get there a little bit early. So I got a little bit nervous and all of that. And I had actually asked at a place called Ryden's Border Store, which is where I did my money conversion to make sure I had some Canadian bills. And they had told me that as long as you do it, you're within that 72-hour period, or you are past that 72-hour period, and you're within a roundabout time frame of when you said you were going to enter the country, because you do have to put a time and date of entry when you fill out the ArriveCAN. I found out that they really won't mess with you that much. And I have to say, the border crossing, I was a little bit nervous because I never crossed by land and I wasn't sure what it was going to be, was a little bit more nerve-wracking than I needed to be, I think, simply because, obviously you pull up, they make sure that you have your Arrive can, which is actually attached right to your passport. So once they scan your passport, it'll pull up all their Arrive can information as long as you've processed your Arrive can within the 72-hour period that I was talking about. But what that did is it kind of showed them who I was. Obviously, it was my first time in the country, so they had me pull aside and check my passport a little bit more. They did go through my car. I won't deny that. They had a quick search of my vehicle. Luckily, I don't really do anything crazy. One big thing to know, I don't know if this is the entire country of Canada, but I know in the province of Ontario, if you have any DUIs within even the past 10 to 15 years, there's a very good chance they won't allow you in. I was very lucky and very smart as a younger Nick, and I knew not to drink and drive. I also knew quite a few taxi phone numbers before I went over to Uber and all those things as those were coming out. And yes, for those younger listeners, the 2% of 17 to 24-year-olds that I have listening, there's actually even some younger ones on there. There were things before Ubers and Lyfts, ride sharing, and that was taxis. So unlike going on the app, you had to physically call and wait for them to show up and hope they knew where they were going once they took you. A lot of them were good. Some of them weren't. A lot of them drove fast, and a lot of them just let the meter keep running. So, that was a thing, but I always knew to be safe and call one of those things. So I never had the opportunity to get a DUI. Not that that's a good opportunity to have, though it does happen and mistakes are made, and, we can't hold anyone against that. So I apologize if anyone feels even slightly offended by that. I don't mean anything by it, but it is something to keep in mind. The website for Canada, which is a phenomenal website, tells you that they won't allow you in if it's up to 5 years. But in talking to a lot of people from the area who have gone north, even if they see it on your record 10 to 15 years on, they may still give you trouble and deny you. Now, I did say that as of April 1st, 2022, pre-entry tests are no longer required for fully vaccinated travelers, but any entry, even if you have all the appropriate documentation and you've done everything right, you can still be turned away at the border. So that is something to keep in mind, especially if you are flying or if you are driving. I haven't really tried or talked to anyone who's taken any of the ferries over. That might be something you might see on the West or East Coast a little bit more. Possibly here in the Great Lakes, but I don't necessarily know. I'd have to look and very possible that the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, has a ferry that'll bring you across. Now, when you travel across, even though you don't have to test anymore, there are still some requirements for exempt travelers. So unless you qualify as a fully vaccinated traveler, there are strict requirements you must follow even if you are exempt from quarantine. So that means that, when you are fully vaccinated and you're exempt from having to quarantine when you come in, you still have to do these things. So you have to wear a mask at all times in public spaces. And maintain a list of close contacts for your first 14 days in Canada. And you also obviously have to monitor yourself for symptoms of COVID-19. Now, I can speak heavily for the border crossing between the border crossing and at Pigeon River and Thunder Bay, which is where I stayed for the weekend. Masks were very prevalent almost everywhere you went. A lot of stores were very uncomfortable if you didn't wear a mask. So I would be prepared and bring some masks with you or purchase some masks while you're there. And once you get through the border and you're good to go, it opens up. It's very much a type of area that is what I fell in love with here and is the catalyst to why I created Heading North, in that it's just open terrain. The geological structures are just absolutely beautiful and obviously have been worn down over millions of years, but the hilltops and mountain ranges are just absolutely gorgeous, and it's something to see. Now, when you go into Canada, one big thing you want to remember is that you can use your debit card. There may be large fees associated with doing so, and I'll talk a little bit more about how the money works here in just a second, but the biggest thing to remember is that using your card may cause fees. So what I did was I took a couple $100 and I exchanged that at Ryden's Border Store, which is in Grand Portage, Minnesota, if you guys are going through the Pigeon River crossing. And they gave me my currency. So I gave them $200, which equaled, I believe, right around $256. So I walked away with a little bit more money. That doesn't mean much. 0.78 cents of US money is equals $1. So they things are a little bit more expensive there. Something that like a meal that would normally cost me, let's say $15 here, cost about $20 to $25 in Canada. So the inflation rate's still a little bit above what we're used to spending in the US, though it felt like I was spending less simply because I had more money for my worth. I didn't have to experience the returning home and converting my money back to the US dollar simply because I kept the last $25 in bills because I like to collect any currency I get from different countries. So that's one big thing to keep in mind. And I want to look up here as we're talking the fuel prices. So this is one of the biggest things that I thought was crazy to me is the cost of fuel in Ontario. Now, I filled up naturally because not to gloat, but I don't necessarily have to pay for fuel based off my job. I'm allowed to use it for personal and work-related expenses as far as my fuel is concerned. I obviously pay taxes at the end of the year for anything I use for personal, but I didn't really, want to risk not being able to use my fuel card in Canada, so I filled up before I crossed the border. So I didn't have to worry about fuel, but effectively it's a period. So 1.93 Canadian dollars with a minimum of 1.73 Canadian dollars on this is January 31st, 2022, was the cost per liter. Now, when you go and you break that down, you're looking, instead of a $40 to $50 fill up, you're looking closer to $100 when you're filling up your tank. So if you are crossing the border by land and you are driving, I would highly recommend that you fill up your tank beforehand. I did not test filling up gas tanks to put in the back of my pickup truck on my way there. I don't know if I would recommend it because the Border Patrol may turn you away for doing that. They were even questioning me about a summer edition Red Bull I had in my car that I simply had there so that I could see if they would scan in at some of the stores that I was going to. So, and that was in the U.S. side. I didn't go on the Canadian side with that. I kept it for myself and then put it back where I got it because it was just a tester thing. So anyway, fuel pricing was a big thing that I kind of took me back. I would highly recommend that you plan for that accordingly. Just look up the prices of where you're going. Just looking at the top 10 gas stations and cheap fuel prices in Ontario. You have Bannon's Gas Far is at $125 a fill up. That's cheapest. So I was actually a little bit under in my rating. And if you are from Canada, please feel free to email info@headingnorthpodcast.com if I'm incorrect here, because I would love to know. I'm going to be spending a lot of time now that the border's open, so I would really love to know that. So other than that, one of the biggest things to do for explorers and travelers like me is to go check out the provincial parks. So provincial parks are very similar to our state, and I would almost feel like our national parks. The one that I was really looking to get into that was about 35 minutes northeast of Thunder Bay, and I had to go northeast for a little while on 17 and then cut down 587 once I hit Loon, Ontario, and drive all the way down to the point. So I noticed too that mostly there's a lot of bike paths that'll get you into that area, but it's very hard to traverse via vehicle to a lot of these provincial parks. And the thing I loved about the provincial parks is that, like our state parks and our national parks, they're very well preserved, but I think Canada does a very good job conserving its environment, much better than the U.S. has trended to do over the past few years. And in that, I found that it was a really good time, and Sleeping Giant was a phenomenal park. Being in Minnesota, hearing what they consider mountains wasn't necessarily what I consider mountains. So getting up into that area and seeing the stuff south of Hudson Bay was pretty neat. So also in Ontario, you have the Blue Lake Provincial Park, you have Naze Provincial Park, and as you're getting closer to the Detroit, Michigan side of things, you've got a lot more. These ones may not necessarily be as well protected and environmentally sound as some of the ones farther up into the province, but you also have the Craigleith, and I apologize if I mispronounce any of these. Anyone from Canada or who travels there, please feel free to email me if I'm incorrect on any of what I'm saying. Then you also have the Sibbald Point Provincial Park, Emily Provincial Park. It's really clustered in that area where you're coming into Toronto. So just keep that in mind. And then Ottawa doesn't seem like it has a whole lot. There's also the Algonquin Provincial Park and Wilderness area, which is a place that I would really like to check out, having native backgrounds within my lineage. So there's a lot to really check out when you go and travel. I stayed at an Airbnb. I noticed a lot more Airbnbs available than VRBOs, and the cost of hotels are very similar to what you're going to find in the US, but the Airbnbs are pretty well priced compared to what I found for Airbnbs and other sharing spaces that you could get in the US. And it's pretty neat. I noticed, especially in Thunder Bay, so in a lot of the larger city areas I don't know about out in more of the country areas, that there are a lot of superhosts. So not only was I able to get a great price on an Airbnb, but it was also from someone that I could trust that had a lot, I think over 500 reviews. So that is going to be the best way for you to stay, in my opinion. You can obviously stay in hotels. If you're going to a place like Ontario, you can also find a cabin or find one of those wilderness resorts that are going to be farther north. Though that is about all I have to say. I hope you enjoy my Canada pride here that I got when I was up there. If you want to support the show, you can do that in many ways. The best way to do so would be heading over to headingnorthpodcast.com/shop and pick up some of the shirts. We have a couple really awesome Heading North Podcast apparel shirts. And then I also added in a I'd Tap That logoed shirt, which is a pun off of maple syrup and tapping maple trees. And there's also a few more to come. I've come up with a few ideas with the help of my beautiful girlfriend, Megan. I can't take all the credit for it because she would kill me for that. And I hope you're listening. If you are, you got credit. You can't say I didn't say that you had this idea. But keep tuned for those. Those will be out probably mid next week. So as you guys are listening to this, it is... Well, I'm recording on May 16th. You guys will be listening to this on May 18th. So in about a week's time after May 18th, you'll be able to check that out. Let me check here. I'm sorry for if you hear the clicking as I'm looking up the calendar. So May 18th. May 25th would probably be a good time to expect that. So once episode 22, next week's episode comes out, you'll be able to see those. Another great way to support the show is to go over to patreon.com/Heading North Podcast. You can sign up for a weekly subscription. I apologize for any of those door noises you just heard. Again, I am in a hotel. There's a $3 and a $5 tier. They give you access to early access to episodes as well as additional episodes and more. I will be making some exclusive content and merch for that as well. Or you can just click the link in the show notes that shows support and donate at a one-time deal. If you want to hear more from Heading North Podcast, go to headingnorthpodcast.com. If you want to find us on social media, just search Heading North Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, or Heading North Pod on Twitter. To find me, just search Nick Risley or Nick_Riz24 on Instagram, and you can go over to linkt.ree /Disney Adams to find all of my social spaces and any of the other projects that I'm working on right now. The show music in this episode was brought to you by Asylum Music and Media Works. And as always, make sure you like and review this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts, because that is the best way for this show to grow.